Welcome back. We are in Chapter 7 on subtraction, and today we finished Chapter 7 by looking at Part C, Subtraction Mental Math. When we talk about mental math, we talk about two kinds of ideas: computing, where we want the exact answer, and estimating, where an approximation is good enough. We'll see 5 different computing techniques and 2 different estimating techniques for subtraction. All right, let's begin. Computing. So the first simplest way is counting up or counting down. Now, it seems as though when we subtract, we want to be just counting down. And for simple problems like 234 minus 2, that's how we think about it. I start at 234 and I want to subtract 2, so I think to myself 233, 232, and so there's my answer, 232. I counted down 2 steps and I got my solution. But if the two numbers are close to each other, I can do a subtraction by counting up. I start at 231, and I'm going to count up until I hit 234. So at 231, I think 232, 233, 234. There's my 234. And I had to add 3 in order to get there. So my solution for my second problem is just 3. Let's take a look at compatible numbers. This is a situation where I might need to subtract 3 or more. Instead of subtracting 97 minus 13 and then subtracting 7, I can change the order a little bit. How about if I focus on the 97 and subtracting 7? So if I do that first, these are compatible in the sense that it's a nice, easy solution. That difference is just 90. And now I can do 90 minus 13, and I get, let's see, 90 minus 10 is going to be 80. Take away another 3 will be 77. Now, there's lots of ways that I can rearrange these terms. So even though they have subtraction signs in there, don't worry. I could write this as 97 minus 7 minus 13 and just put those in any order that I want. I could say minus 7 plus 97 minus 13, or minus 13 minus 7 plus 97. In fact, this gives us another way of using compatible numbers. Minus 13 minus 7 is really minus 20. And now I can think 97 minus 20, 77, and that's another way that I could arrive at the answer. So feel free to move terms around, but just carry the minus sign with you when you do. Break apart numbers. Typically, we will break apart the second number. We're going to break apart the number that we are subtracting. So 90 minus 13, we saw this in the previous problem. I really thought of this as 90 minus 10 minus 3. So 80 minus 3, which was the 77. Now, what if I had 83 minus 7? Well, I could break apart that 7 and just say, well, first of all, I just want to subtract 3. And then 7 is 3 plus 4, so I'll have to subtract 3 and then subtract 4. So 80 minus 4, or the 76. This last case is a little trickier. This 129, I'll break it apart. I want to subtract 100, and then I'll subtract 20, and then I'll subtract 9. So going through the process, 743. First of all, I subtract 100, and I get 643. And then I subtract 20, I get 623. And then I subtract 9. Now, how would you subtract 9? Maybe you could subtract 10 and add 1 back, so like a 13, which makes it a 14, so 614. We get our solution. So that's break apart. Our next trick is compensation, and I actually did a little bit of compensation in the previous problem. The trick is subtract too much and then compensate by going back. So let's change this problem. Instead of 90 minus 19, let's say 90 minus 20, because that's easy. But here I've over subtracted, so I need to add something back. So adding back, there's my compensation. So the 90 minus 20 is 70, and then plus 1 gives me 71. This is a nice technique. Over subtract and then add back. Same change. We could use compensation here. I could subtract 20 and then add 1 back. But we notice that they're both just 1 away from nice round numbers. If I add 1 to the 99 and I add 1 to the 19, I get 100 minus 20, which is very clearly 80. If I have subtraction, then I want to add the same or subtract the same to both numbers, and it won't actually change the problem. We've seen this as a technique for subtracting in the past, and we can just use this with our mental math as well. Let's move on to estimating. Our first trick is rounding. Well, I could just round to the first place, and so I look to the second place to tell me how to round. So this becomes 900 minus 100, which is 800. So my answer is approximately 800. But as you can tell, even just eyeballing this, that's probably not a great estimate. Maybe should we try rounding to 2 places? So if I want to keep the 285, that's going to round up to maybe 86. So 860. And then how about my next one? 134. That'll just stay 130 minus 130. Now, how do we handle this? Maybe at this point I do some break apart. So 860 minus 100 gives me 760. I've subtracted the 100. Now I need to subtract the 30. So 730. So 730 becomes my approximation for the answer. These techniques can be combined, right? Notice that I used rounding, but then I used break apart as well. Very often in subtraction problems, you'll use a combination of these tricks. It's not always purely one thing or another. Our last estimating technique is called front-end with adjustment, and we will just look at the first number, don't round, but I will just take this purely as 800, and I'll subtract 200. So that gives me 600. And now let's do rounding for the remaining part of the number. So 68 rounds to 70, 37 rounds to 40. So 70 minus 40 equals 30. Now, do I want to add these numbers or subtract them? I actually want to add, and so 630 becomes the solution I seek. Now, let's try that with our second problem. Front end with adjustment. So 700 minus 300. So that's 400. And then I'll have 20 minus 30. And something unusual happens here. I actually end up with negative. So negative 10. So in this case, 400 minus 10, 390 is my estimation in that case. So for the first problem, my estimated solution is approximately 630, and for the second problem, my solution is approximately 390. And that ends subtraction mental math. There are the techniques again with some sample problems. Give the worksheet problems a try. There's one page on the worksheet where I supposedly give you a bunch of random numbers. You can skip that, or maybe try making a few random numbers yourself and seeing what kind of subtraction techniques you would use if you just randomly generate something. The homework problem is set up as a official quiz to turn in class, but again, since we're just doing the online setting, write it up as a normal homework and include it at the end of your worksheet problems. All right, good luck with these things. Ask me if you have questions.